here in a shortened week with the Labor Day holiday. Hope everyone had a phenomenal Monday. Of course, my wife and I were in Germany, and you'll hear us talking about our trip. And if you saw any of the parts of our trip, we got back in time to watch some Orioles baseball on Labor Day on Monday, and even sort of caught up with our bodies in the time change. And I thought, man, I put the game on at 10 after 1. I didn't even know who was pitching. Like, I didn't really know. And I said, man, I'm getting Jimenez? The hell? Then he's 3 runs on the home run early in the game, and I'm like, did I have to come back from Deutschland for this at this point? And then Ubaldo Jimenez went on to throw, if not the game of his career, certainly the game of his recent career with the Orioles. Here to talk all things Orioles and where they stand, which is still in a very, very stalking position right now. Our Luke Jones, who has been living with the Ravens roster moves and living at Oriole Park at Camden Yards the last week with Blue Jays and Yankees. Oh, Luke, you were the one at the games last week.
That's right. And going back to your point about Ubaldo Jimenez, Orioles hadn't had a complete game in 2 years. Miguel Gonzalez in early September of 2014. Entering Monday, there had only been a total of 39 complete games in the American League, which really illustrates how pitching has just changed so dramatically over the last 15, 20 years, let alone longer. And Ubaldo Jimenez throws a complete game. I mean, it just... not the guy that anyone would have guessed if you're trying to figure out any of these Orioles pitchers being capable of going the distance. I mean, we've seen Kevin Gausman pitch really well. We know Bundy, from a pitch count standpoint, not really in play there. So, you were thinking, well, they'll probably go through a second straight season without a complete game. And lo and behold, despite giving up the 3-run homer in the first inning, Ubaldo settles in, pitches exceptionally well. In fact, retired the last 17 batters he faced, last 25 of 26, and really did a nice job. A Tampa Bay offense that isn't all that great, we know that, but still really impressive work and a nice way to start a really critical road trip, being able to rest your entire bullpen for an afternoon of baseball.
All right, so I'm not even going to pretend that I watched a lot of baseball last week. I was in Germany. The games were starting at 1 in the morning, but I was box score watching, and I did get up at one point at 4:30 in the morning and saw that one of the games on Friday night was in the 9th inning and sort of playing on. I saw the crowds. I saw the lack of the crowds. I saw some columns in social media. I am addressing that in a 2-part blog later on this week about my thoughts on the Orioles and the crowds. But, tell me about the team, Luke. And I asked Alan this question, and I think I'm sort of back on the horse here. And obviously with the Ravens being here, we're going to be out of practice this week. We're going to be watching these games. They have this weird afternoon game on Wednesday. What do you like about the Orioles right now? In a stalking couple games back, nobody's pulling away. The one thing I like is that they are going to have head-to-head action with these teams. They are going to be able to make their own ground up, but it's the water they need to tread between here and then. And the one thing I don't like right now is they don't play well on the road, and they're about to go into a road stretch right now.
Well, I mean, that's the obvious thing. I mean, I wrote about it Monday morning at WNST.net. You can check it out right now. I mean, this is an Orioles team that has one winning road trip all year. You know how long that road trip was? It was an abbreviated 2-game set in Minnesota back in mid-May. They've had some 500 road
and then it
trips.
rained.
Yeah. They've had some 500 road trips where, they went 5-5 on that West Coast trip back in August, if you recall, not too long ago. To their credit, they've avoided having a disastrous road trip. They haven't had that 2-7 kind of a road trip either. But let's face it. I mean, you look at their road record, even with Monday's win, this is a team that's been a bad team on the road. I mean, it just has been. So that's concerning. But to get back to your question,
and their pitching's been a problem on the road, and they've had both problems. I mean, but both of the Achilles heels on the road, they've played poorly in every aspect of the game.
Yeah, I mean, their offense hasn't been as good on the road as it has been at home. I mean, their offense, we've talked about it in the second half. The offense has been bad in the second half. I mean, there's no way to overlook that. But their overall performance this year, they've been a less effective offense on the road, but not to the point where they can't win games. The big issue has been how poorly they pitched on the road. Now, we always talk about Camden Yards, right? A hitter-friendly ballpark, certainly catered to this lineup, hitting a lot of home runs. But Orioles pitching has an ERA below 4 at Camden Yards. The problem is their ERA is just below 5. I mean, it's on the road. It's a full run worse on the road. So, that's the big challenge here. But as far as what I like, I think, we know the basic strengths of this team right now. What I really like, and we saw this in the first 2 games of the Yankees series over the weekend, Kevin Gausman's pitching, if not like an ace, certainly pitching like a number 2 starter right now. He's been outstanding his last 3 starts, hasn't even given up a run. Dylan Bundy had the rough start in the Bronx last weekend, bounced back and pitched well this past weekend against the Yankees. So you have those 2 guys. Chris Tillman is throwing again. His last couple of throwing sessions have looked good. If all goes well in his bullpen session coming up here over the next couple of days, and then a light game of catch at the end of the week, he's in line to start on Sunday. So potentially, if, and it's a big if because we know it's a shoulder issue, if they get Chris Tillman back, now you have a top 3 of him, Ubaldo, or not as go the distance. He's quietly pitched pretty well since he's been inserted into the rotation once again. Pitched well at Washington despite the Orioles not scoring any runs for him. Pitched 6 innings, only gave up 1 run. Pitched well against Toronto in the one game that the Orioles did win against the Blue Jays, and he's looking pretty good right now. He's commanding the 2-seam fastball, which, if you remember going back to last year in the first half, that was the key for him. He pitched well because he commanded his 2-seamer. When he doesn't command that, his other stuff typically is not going to command well enough to be effective enough. So I don't know how much you trust him at this point, but he's pitched well enough that if Woman comes back as early as this coming Sunday, there's no doubt about that. Thing that has not been
month, the Orioles are going to go away no matter what they do. If that's the way Houston or Detroit play for a little while, the Orioles are not going to make the playoffs, or somebody's not going to make the playoffs, right?
So, and one thing I will say, even in a couple of these lesser seasons under Buck Showalter, 2011 comes to mind. Last year, they've still had winning Septembers. They've always found a way to play pretty well toward the end of the season. Remember last year, it was that horrendous stretch at the end of August going into September where they lost 12 of 13. That really kind of put the stamp on the rest of the season. They played okay, the rest of the way. They won their last 5, if you remember, to get the 500. But it was that stretch right there. But they typically played pretty darn well in the month of September. And I think part of it does have to do with you do have a deeper bullpen. Now, there's clearly not a ton of quality in that bullpen, but we know how Buck Showalter can use a bullpen to help, save his top guys. Darren O'Day is throwing now. His first couple throwing sessions have gone well, so you keep your fingers crossed that, maybe you do have him for the final 2.5 weeks, something along those lines. Certainly would be a huge shot in the arm for the bullpen. But, that's just one thing. It seems that Buck Showalter isn't perfect, but he does a darn good job managing his bullpen, does a good job managing his bench for the most part. And, that's something that, with 25 games to go, this is wide open, for all these teams. Who's going to get hot in the case of the division?
And who's going to have their Ubaldo Jimenez pitch like that, right?
Exactly. It's not even just going to be just about him. It's all these teams. Who has a September call-up that might play a bigger role than someone anticipates? Who called someone up that some rookie is going to make a big impact, like Manny Machado did for the Orioles in 2012, if you recall. So, there are a lot of factors that go into this. But again, you're talking about a 25-game stretch. That's a sprint. So, you can kind of throw a lot of tendencies, a lot of season-long stats. Not saying those things are meaningless, but you get 25 games is small sample size territory. We always talk about that at the beginning of the year, right? Think of all those woeful Orioles teams for 14 straight years. They had some teams that played well over the first 25 games of the season. So, it's not a different, it's no different at the end of the season. It's all about which team can really get hot, which team is healthy, which, certainly the Orioles have dealt with their injuries, but, Adam Jones back in the lineup, Chris Tillman potentially here within the week pitching again. O'Day, we'll see about him. So, those couple players coming back could be as big of a shot in the arm as any deadline acquisition that was made for any of these teams. So we're just going to have to see how it plays out. But as you mentioned, all these teams have something wrong with them. We'll see if that's exposed, or we'll see if any of these teams ultimately are able to overcome that fatal flaw. In the case of the Orioles, it's pretty clear. It's obvious they have to hit. We know that. That's how this team was constructed back in the offseason and over the last few years. But if they can sustain some of this, modestly improve starting pitching and continue to get big outings from Gausman and Bundy and hopefully Tillman back in that picture, you like their chances a whole lot more, that's for sure.
Detroit thing's interesting this weekend, right? I mean, an interesting time to be playing them and be going to Boston next week. As I said, a good week here could really put them in a great position. A bad week here, as you've pointed out, could put them, 2 games behind Detroit for the wild card.
Yeah. I mean, now if they have a disastrous road trip, like if they would go 2-7, then you're really behind the 8 ball. But let's just say they follow their trend of what they've been through most of the season on the road, and that would put them somewhere in the neighborhood of a 4-5 road trip, which clearly isn't what they'd be looking for.
Well, that would be a 3-5 road trip right now because they won the first one.
Right. So, that wouldn't end their season. That you wouldn't think that would put them so far behind in the wild card, unless that included a complete sweep from Detroit. But even then, probably not in a case where they're out of the wild card, but would probably put them in a position where, unless Toronto and Boston fall off and they just clean house when they play them over the final 2 weeks, then they'd probably just be looking at, okay, most of your attention going to be focused on getting the wild card here. But, this is huge. And as you said, I mean, Detroit, and think back to when the Orioles played Detroit back in May. I mean, there had been legitimate talk. I legitimately overheard Detroit writers in the press box after the Tigers, who won the final game of that 4-game set. Remember, they salvaged that game. O'Day gave up 2 home runs in the 9th inning. But there was lots of talk of Brad Ausmus being fired. Like that week, they were talking about it. Writers were openly talking about it in the press box. And you see where they are now, 13 games over 500. And, of any of these wild card teams, they've been playing well. We know Houston.
Well, they have heavy expectation there. I mean, I talked to Chris Burke about this from Sports Illustrated. He lives up in Michigan. We were talking some NFL, but threw in a little Tigers talk. I mean, their owner tries to win. Their owner wants to win every year. Their owner's getting older. He wants to have a parade like he did for the hockey team. And, there is they didn't expect to be an also-ran, which is what they look like for large stretches of the year. I mean, this is almost similar to the Orioles' 2012 run to some degree, right?
Yeah, in some ways. I mean, and it's funny, they don't have a great run differential, so they don't have that profile that wows you from, just looking at them statistically, but they have been that way. And it's funny, too. Think back, you just mentioned ownership and high expectations for that team, but keep in mind, they were sellers last year. I mean, they played out the string. They sold off David Price. They sold off Cespedes. You're wondering what their offseason is going to look like, and then they signed Jordan Zimmerman. They signed Justin Upton, who had a huge home run for them on Monday. And things they just got off to such a bad start, and you're thinking, wow, you wonder about the management here, what's going to happen? Are they going to be sellers again? And they've taken off, and they're not, you wouldn't say they have a great chance of catching Cleveland because the Indians have been so good this year.
They didn't lose while I was away.
Yeah, but overall, I mean, Detroit has been tough, so that's going to be interesting. And the holdovers there, coming this weekend, the Orioles coming in there. Those guys are going to be thinking about 2014 as far as this one having some postseason ramifications, and both these teams in the playoff race. They're going to be thinking about some, trying to exact some revenge on their, from their perspective. So that'll be interesting. But first things first, Orioles need to, you'd like to try to, anything short of taking 2 out of 3 from Tampa, but you'd really like to sweep them because this team at some point is going to have to stack some wins on the road. So why leave that work for you leave more work for yourself in the final 2 weeks? Take care of a Tampa team that just isn't all that good, let's face it.
He is Luke Jones. He'll be covering the Orioles all week long, as will I. They're down in Tampa and off to Detroit this weekend. And, of course, Luke and I will be on the backfields in Owings Mills with full live reports. Anything you miss, you can find in the Buy a Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device. You can also download the TuneIn Radio app. We come in crystal clear anywhere that you go. Our morning newspaper hits your email inbox at 7 a.m. each and every morning. That's powered up daily entirely by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. Big appreciation for them. Still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life, even after Labor Day. It's time to get ready for tailgating condition, I think, at Planet Fitness. Last but not least, breaking news as it happened all weekend. I was in Germany getting wild text at Billy Joel concerts at all sorts of hours. Justin Forsett, he's in, he's out, he's in, he's out. Luke's blogging about it, writing great stuff. But it all comes to you first on the WNST text service. You'll always be the smartest Baltimore sports fan because you'll know first. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. And Dennis will be here on Thursday driving you home from 3 until 5 and getting you ready for real football. Fake football's over with. Carolina and Denver on Thursday night, kicking the season off at Dirks Bentley and One Direction, or is it One Republic? It's One Republic, not One Direction. It's a different direction than the Republic. Nasty at WNST.net reaches me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram. Appreciate all the love from my wife last week from Germany. She met the man who saved her life twice, and we're certainly appreciative. We're throwing a party for him for his birthday on November 12th. We hope you hold the date. Come meet him. Come say hello. Bring a Germany flag. We'll have some strudel. We'll have some schnitzel. It'll be great. Wonderful trip. Wonderful feedback. Really appreciate it. And we will be swabbing throughout the fall to save more lives. So please bring some folks. Get them on the registry. Let's save some more lives for There Goes My Hero and for Delete Blood Cancer, the DKMS in Germany who saved my wife's life. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Taos in Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.